The first snowfall of December drifted beyond the palace windows like scattered lace, softening the rooftops of London beneath a silver veil. Inside Blackthorn Palace, however, nothing felt gentle. Crystal chandeliers blazed overhead. Violins sang beneath painted ceilings. Hundreds of aristocrats drifted through the grand gallery in shimmering gowns and tailored coats, their laughter rising toward gilded arches like music rehearsed too often to remain sincere. Tonight's charity gala was the most anticipated event of the season. Yet no one was speaking about the children who would benefit from the evening's donations. No one was discussing the orchestra. No one was admiring the winter roses imported from France. Every conversation revolved around one woman, the Duchess of Blackthorn, and whether the Duke would finally abandon her. Near the entrance, Lady Seraphine Ashcroft stood surrounded by admirers. Her ivory gown sparkled beneath candlelight. Diamonds glimmered at her throat. Wherever she moved, attention followed. For nearly a year, society had watched her grow closer to the Duke. At first, the friendship seemed innocent. Then it became constant. Public appearances, political dinners, charitable committees, private consultations regarding estate affairs. People began noticing how naturally she occupied places beside him, places that belonged to his wife. Whispers became assumptions. Assumptions became accepted truth. Now many believed it was merely a matter of time before Seraphine replaced the Duchess entirely. The cruelest part was that nobody openly said such things. Victorian society rarely stabbed with visible knives. Its preferred weapon was silence. A footman suddenly announced from the entrance, "Her Grace, the Duchess of Blackthorn." Conversations died instantly. The orchestra continued playing, but the room itself seemed to stop breathing. Dozens of heads turned. Some faces showed curiosity. Others showed pity. Many displayed something worse: expectation. The Duchess entered slowly. 6 months pregnant, Eleanor Blackthorn carried herself with quiet dignity despite the strain visible beneath her pale features. Her champagne-colored gown flowed gracefully around the curve of her stomach. Delicate lace sleeves concealed wrists grown thinner from months of illness. She had spent much of the year secluded. Society claimed she was fragile, unstable, unsuitable for the responsibilities of motherhood. The rumors had spread so efficiently that many could no longer remember where they had originated, only that they existed. Eleanor felt every stare, every whisper abruptly cut short, every smile offered a second too late. The humiliation settled over her shoulders like a cloak of ice. Still she lifted her chin. A duchess did not beg for acceptance, not even when her heart ached. Across the gallery stood her husband, Arthur Blackthorn, Duke of Blackthorn. Tall, imposing, and impossibly composed. His dark formal coat contrasted sharply against the gold-lit room. For a brief moment their eyes met. Eleanor searched his face. She hoped for something. A reassuring smile. An encouraging nod. Anything. Instead, his expression remained unreadable. The same calm mask he had worn for months. Disappointment tightened inside her chest. She looked away first. Nearby, Lady Seraphine observed the exchange. The faintest smile touched her lips. A smile so brief most people missed it. But Eleanor did not. The evening continued. Guests danced. Champagne flowed. Laughter echoed. Yet wherever Eleanor walked, conversations faltered. Several women suddenly found reasons to leave. Others offered shallow courtesies before turning elsewhere. One countess actually glanced toward Eleanor's stomach and whispered something that caused 3 companions to laugh behind their fans. Eleanor pretended not to notice. Pretending had become one of her strongest skills. An hour later, the guests gathered inside the palace's magnificent winter hall. Towering evergreen trees lined the marble walls. Thousands of candles illuminated garlands of white roses. At the far end of the hall stood a platform prepared for the evening's principal announcement. The chairman of the Royal Children's Relief Fund stepped forward. "My lords and ladies," he announced, "tonight, we celebrate a new chapter in our efforts to establish London's first charitable hospital dedicated exclusively to impoverished children." Applause followed. The chairman smiled. After careful consideration, the committee has selected a patron whose compassion and dedication embody the very purpose of this institution. The crowd listened politely. Few seemed particularly interested. Then the chairman continued. "We are honored to name Her Grace, the Duchess of Blackthorn, as patron of the Blackthorn Children's Hospital." The room froze. Shock swept through the audience. Several ladies exchanged astonished looks. Others immediately began whispering. Eleanor herself blinked in disbelief. She had not expected this. had not even known her name was being considered. For the first time that evening, genuine warmth stirred within her chest. Then she heard applause. One pair of hands. Only one. Arthur. The Duke stood alone among hundreds, calmly applauding his wife. His expression remained composed, but his gaze never left her. Slowly others joined. Polite applause spread throughout the hall. Yet something felt wrong. The atmosphere remained tense, uncomfortable. Then a voice broke through the clapping. How extraordinary! Lady Seraphine stepped forward. The applause died instantly. Every eye followed her. Her smile appeared pleasant, almost gracious, which made her words far more dangerous. I confess I am surprised. The chairman frowned. Lady Seraphine? She folded her gloved hands. Surely a hospital devoted to vulnerable children deserves a patron capable of managing such responsibility. The implication landed like a stone dropped into still water. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Eleanor felt her face pale. Seraphine continued gently. Too gently. Of course, perhaps I am mistaken. Yet many have expressed concern regarding her Grace's health these past months. Silence followed. Nobody defended the Duchess. Nobody objected. That silence hurt more than the accusation itself. Eleanor looked across the hall. Again her eyes found Arthur. Again he remained silent. A terrible ache spread through her heart. Had the rumors truly reached this point? Had society already decided her fate? Was she merely standing inside the ruins before realizing the house had fallen? Lady Seraphine turned toward the crowd. Confidence radiated from her. She knew exactly what people believed, exactly what they expected. Then her gaze shifted to the Duke. A faint smile touched her lips. My lord, she said softly, though everyone heard, perhaps the time has come to settle uncertainty once and for all. The chandeliers seemed to glow brighter. The hall grew impossibly still. Even the musicians stopped playing. Eleanor's pulse thundered in her ears. Some instinct warned her that the evening was about to change forever. Seraphine took another step forward. Then, before the entire aristocracy of London, she looked directly at the Duke and said, Your Grace, perhaps you should finally decide which woman truly belongs beside you. The silence that followed felt louder than any scream. And for the first time all evening, the Duke's expression changed. The silence that followed Lady Seraphine's challenge lingered long after the gala ended. For 3 days, London spoke of nothing else. Newspapers avoided printing the confrontation directly, yet society needed no headlines. Gossip traveled faster than ink. By the end of the week, every drawing room, opera box, and gentlemen's club had reached the same conclusion. The Duke's marriage was collapsing. No one knew what answer Arthur Blackthorne intended to give. His silence had become a mystery of its own. At Blackthorne Palace, winter settled heavily over the grounds. Frost coated the gardens. Bare branches rattled against tall windows whenever northern winds swept across the estate. Inside, Eleanor sat alone in the morning room. An unopened stack of invitations rested beside her. Tea had long since gone cold. Since the gala, visitors had become strangely scarce. Many who once called themselves friends suddenly discovered other obligations. Others merely waited to see which woman would win before choosing where their loyalty belonged. Such was the nature of society. It preferred certainty before kindness. A knock interrupted her thoughts. Her maid entered carrying a silver tray. Something arrived for your Grace. Eleanor glanced toward the tray. A single envelope rested upon it. No seal. No signature. Nothing. A chill moved through her. Who delivered it? The messenger refused to give a name. The maid departed. Eleanor carefully opened the envelope. Inside rested a folded sheet of paper. Only one sentence had been written. Your child is not safe inside Blackthorne Palace. The Duchess stared at the words. Her heartbeat quickened. She read the sentence again. And again. The handwriting was unfamiliar. The paper ordinary. No clue revealed the sender. Only the warning remained. A sensible woman might have dismissed it as cruelty. Yet something about the message unsettled her. It felt less like a threat, more like concern. That evening she burned the letter. 2 days later another arrived. This one contained only a date. October 14th. Nothing more. No explanation. No signature. No context. The mystery deepened. By the end of the month, 5 letters had appeared. Each delivered anonymously. Each containing fragments of information that made little sense alone. A date. A name. A location. An account number. A reference to an old estate transaction. The messages resembled pieces of a puzzle. and someone clearly wanted Eleanor to assemble it. Meanwhile, Lady Seraphine seemed to flourish. Rather than retreat after the scandalous confrontation, she became more visible than ever. Guests arriving at Blackthorn House often discovered her already present. She attended committee meetings alongside the Duke. She appeared at political luncheons. She was seen riding through Hyde Park in a carriage remarkably similar to the Duchess's own. Rumors multiplied. Society interpreted every appearance as proof. The future Duchess had already been chosen. Only the formal announcement remained. One afternoon Eleanor entered the palace library seeking a volume of poetry. Instead, she found Lady Seraphine standing beside Arthur's desk. The room fell silent. For a brief moment nobody moved. Lady Seraphine smiled first. "My apologies, Your Grace. I did not realize the room was occupied." The lie was obvious. The library belonged to Eleanor as much as anyone. Yet Seraphine spoke as though the Duchess were the visitor. Arthur remained standing near the fireplace. His expression revealed nothing. As always, Eleanor quietly collected her book. Then she left. Not because she felt defeated. Because she refused to provide society another spectacle. Yet the encounter haunted her. The palace no longer felt entirely hers. It felt occupied. Claimed by invisible forces slowly pushing her toward the edges of her own life. Several days later, another anonymous letter arrived. This time the contents changed everything. Inside rested a small key. Attached was a note. "Look beneath the West Tower archives." Eleanor stared at the message. The West Tower had not been used regularly for decades. Most servants avoided it. Dust-covered records from previous generations filled its storage rooms. That evening curiosity overcame caution. Wrapped in a cloak, she climbed the narrow stone staircase alone. The higher she climbed, the colder the air became. Ancient portraits watched from shadowed walls. The tower seemed frozen in another century. At last she reached the archive chamber. Rows of forgotten ledgers lined the shelves. Dust danced through lantern light. The key fit a small iron cabinet hidden behind stacks of records. Inside lay a leather-bound ledger. Nothing more. At first glance it appeared ordinary. Then Eleanor opened it. Her breath caught. The pages contained financial transactions dating back nearly 15 years. Land purchases, estate transfers, charitable funds, private investments. Certain names appeared repeatedly. Powerful families, influential politicians, bankers, judges. Among them was one name appearing more often than any other. Ashcroft, Seraphine's family. Confused, Eleanor carried the ledger back to her chambers. 4 hours she studied its contents. Patterns slowly emerged. Money had vanished from charitable foundations. Properties had changed ownership through suspicious arrangements. Large sums moved between individuals who publicly claimed no connection whatsoever. Something enormous hid beneath these pages. Something dangerous. The following morning she discovered she was not the only person investigating. Arthur entered her sitting room unexpectedly. His gaze immediately settled upon the ledger resting beside her chair. For the first time in months, genuine surprise crossed his face. "Where did you find that?" Eleanor looked up sharply. "You recognize it?" A long silence followed. The Duke approached slowly. His eyes remained fixed on the book. "I asked where you found it." His voice sounded controlled. Too controlled. Eleanor's suspicion deepened. "Why?" Another pause. Then Arthur lowered himself into a chair opposite her. "What else have you received?" The question stunned her. "You know about the letters." "I know someone has been trying to contact you." The room suddenly felt smaller. Every unanswered question seemed to gather between them. "Who?" Eleanor asked. Arthur's jaw tightened. "I don't know." For a moment she almost laughed. Months of silence. Months of distance. Yet somehow he knew about secret messages arriving at her chambers. The contradiction made no sense. Arthur leaned forward. "Listen carefully. If another letter arrives, you must show it to me immediately." "Why?" His gaze met hers. "Because someone inside our world is preparing for war." The words hung heavily between them. Before Eleanor could respond, a servant entered carrying the afternoon post. Among the correspondence rested yet another anonymous envelope. The servant departed. Neither husband nor wife moved. Slowly Eleanor picked it up. Arthur watched. The seal was already broken. Inside rested a single folded document. As Eleanor unfolded the paper, her face drained of color. It was a sworn confession. Signed by a man who had supposedly died 12 years earlier. And every accusation inside pointed directly toward Lady Seraphine Ashcroft's family. The confession changed everything. For 3 sleepless nights, Eleanor read the document again and again beneath the glow of a single lamp. Every paragraph seemed more impossible than the last. The man who had signed it was Lord Benjamin Hawthorne, a financier whose death had been recorded 12 years earlier. According to the confession, several prominent aristocratic families had secretly manipulated inheritance trusts, charitable foundations, and estate transfers throughout England. Vast fortunes had quietly changed hands while respectable society applauded itself for honor and virtue. Again and again one family name appeared: Ashcroft. Yet what troubled Eleanor most was not the accusation itself. It was the final paragraph. If this confession is ever discovered, understand that my death was no accident. The families involved will protect themselves at any cost. Even children are not beyond their reach. The words haunted her. For the first time, the anonymous warnings felt terrifyingly real. Someone had not been trying to frighten her. Someone had been trying to protect her. Outside, winter tightened its grip on the countryside. Snow-covered roads. Rivers froze. The skies remained a constant blanket of iron gray. Then another letter arrived. Unlike the previous messages, this one contained instructions. Travel to Northmere Station on the 17th. Bring the ledger. Trust no one. No signature. No explanation. Nothing else. Eleanor immediately carried the note to Arthur. His reaction startled her. The moment he read the message, his expression darkened. We leave tomorrow. She blinked. You believe it? Yes. You know who is sending these letters? His silence answered the question. Not completely, but enough. For the first time since their marriage had begun unraveling, Arthur appeared genuinely worried. Not politically concerned. Not socially cautious. Afraid. The realization unsettled Eleanor more than the letter itself. The following morning they departed quietly before dawn. No servants accompanied them. No entourage followed. The fewer people who knew their destination, the better. Snow fell steadily throughout the journey. The countryside disappeared beneath white hills and skeletal forests. 4 hours they traveled by carriage through worsening weather. By late afternoon the storm became nearly impossible to navigate. Visibility vanished. The horses struggled. Wind screamed across the road. At last they reached Northmere Station. The small railway station stood alone on a frozen stretch of countryside, surrounded by snow-covered fields and dark pine forests. Unfortunately, no trains were operating. The storm had closed the railway. The station master delivered the news apologetically. You'll have to remain here until morning, Your Grace. Night approached quickly. With nowhere else to go, Arthur and Eleanor settled inside the station's waiting room. The building was old but sturdy. A small fireplace offered warmth. Outside, snow battered the windows relentlessly. Inside, silence settled between husband and wife. For a long time neither spoke. The crackling fire became the room's only voice. Eleanor sat near the window. Arthur occupied a chair across from her. The distance between them felt strangely familiar. Months ago such silence would have seemed normal. Tonight it felt unbearable. Finally Eleanor broke it. How long? Arthur looked up. How long what? How long have you known? The Duke stared into the fire. Long enough. The answer frustrated her. Arthur. Her voice softened. Please. The single word seemed to affect him more than anger ever could. For several moments he said nothing. Then he leaned forward. The investigation began 4 years ago. Eleanor froze. 4 years. 4 years of secrets. 4 years of distance. 4 years of silence. The Ashcrofts? She asked quietly. They were among the first names. The fire crackled. Snow struck the windows. The station felt isolated from the rest of the world. Arthur rubbed a hand across his jaw. Suddenly he looked exhausted. Not like a duke. Like a man carrying a burden too heavy for too long. My father discovered irregularities shortly before his death, he said. He left documents. You never told me. No. Why? The question lingered. Arthur's eyes lifted toward hers. For the first time in months she saw genuine regret. Because I believed keeping you uninvolved would keep you safe. The answer hurt more than she expected. Not because it was cruel. Because it was sincere. Eleanor looked away. The storm outside seemed to mirror the turmoil inside her chest. You succeeded, she said softly. Arthur frowned. What do you mean? You kept me safe from danger. Her voice trembled. But not from loneliness. The word struck him visibly. Years of restraint suddenly cracked. Eleanor rose from her chair. Months of pain finally demanded release. I watched society replace me while my husband said nothing. She swallowed hard. I listened to people question my sanity. Her hands moved protectively over her stomach. I stood alone while carrying your child. Arthur remained silent. Not because he disagreed. Because he could not. I needed my husband, she whispered. Instead I received a stranger. The room fell quiet. The confession cost her more than she expected. Tears gathered in her eyes. She hated them. Yet she could not stop them. Arthur slowly stood. For a moment Eleanor feared another silence. Another retreat. Another wall. Instead he crossed the room. Not quickly. Not dramatically. Simply as a man finally approaching a truth he could no longer avoid. Eleanor. His voice sounded rough. Unsteady. Human. I thought protecting you was enough. The Duchess looked up. The Duke's usual composure had vanished. For the first time in years she saw vulnerability. Real vulnerability. I was wrong. The admission hung between them. Simple. Honest. Powerful. Arthur reached toward her. Then hesitated. The hesitation revealed more than confidence ever could. Finally Eleanor placed her hand in his. Warmth passed between them. Not passion. Something deeper. Recognition. The feeling that perhaps neither had stopped loving the other. They had simply lost their way. For several moments neither spoke. The fire illuminated their faces. Outside the storm raged on. Inside, something fragile began rebuilding itself. Then Arthur spoke again. There is one thing I never told you. Eleanor looked at him. What? His gaze shifted toward her stomach. Fear appeared in his eyes. Not for himself. For her. For their child. The conspiracy is larger than we imagined. A chill moved through the room. The letters prove someone within their circle has turned against them. Why? Arthur's expression darkened. Because someone is about to expose everything. Before Eleanor could respond, a sudden sound shattered the silence. Hoofbeats. Many of them. Approaching rapidly through the snow. Arthur immediately released her hand. His instincts sharpened. Danger. The station master burst through the door. Pale. Breathless. Terrified. Your Grace, he gasped. There are riders outside. Arthur moved toward the window. Snow swirled beyond the glass. Dark figures emerged from the storm. Mounted men. At least a dozen. Every one armed. The Duke's face hardened. Eleanor felt fear grip her chest. Then the station master spoke the words neither wanted to hear. They're carrying government warrants. Arthur's jaw tightened. For what? The old man swallowed. The answer turned the room cold. Your arrest, Your Grace. The news of the Duke's arrest reached London before Arthur and Eleanor themselves returned. By the time their carriage entered the city, the scandal had grown into something monstrous. Newspapers printed speculation on every front page. Political rivals demanded investigations. Aristocratic families distanced themselves from Blackthorn House. Rumors multiplied faster than facts. Some claimed Arthur had stolen from charitable foundations. Others insisted he had plotted against Parliament itself. The truth disappeared beneath an avalanche of gossip. Yet despite the accusations, Arthur remained strangely calm. That frightened Eleanor more than panic would have. Because calm suggested certainty. And certainty suggested he already knew what was coming. 3 days later, official notices summoned the Duke before a special assembly convened at Westminster Hall. The hearing would determine not only his future, but the future of the Blackthorn title itself. Attendance was restricted. Yet nearly every influential family in England somehow secured an invitation. No one wished to miss the downfall of a duke. On the morning of the hearing, London awoke beneath heavy clouds. Rain tapped against carriage roofs. Church bells echoed through gray streets. Eleanor stood before her bedroom mirror while maids adjusted the folds of her gown. Her pregnancy had advanced noticeably. The child beneath her heart moved often now. A reminder that she was no longer fighting only for herself. The mirror reflected a woman exhausted by months of whispers. Months of humiliation. Months of uncertainty. Yet there was strength there too. A quiet strength forged through suffering. The door opened. Arthur entered. The servants immediately withdrew. For a moment husband and wife stood alone. Neither spoke. Words felt inadequate. Finally Arthur approached. His gaze lingered on her face. You do not have to attend. Eleanor almost smiled. Neither do you. A faint spark of amusement touched his eyes. The first she had seen in weeks. Then it vanished. Today may become unpleasant. She stepped closer. It became unpleasant months ago. The truth settled between them. Arthur reached for her hand. This time there was no hesitation. "No matter what happens," he said quietly, "stay beside me." Eleanor looked into his eyes. For the first time in years she trusted what she saw there. "I will." Westminster Hall overflowed long before proceedings began. Politicians, judges, industrial magnates, military officers, nobility. The entire room buzzed with anticipation. Rows of reporters occupied special galleries. Pens waited eagerly above paper. Careers would be made before sunset. Reputations would be destroyed. At the center stood a long oak table prepared for testimony. Arthur took his seat. Eleanor sat beside him. The moment they appeared, whispers exploded throughout the chamber. Many stared openly at her pregnancy. Others examined the Duke with barely concealed hostility. Then another arrival drew attention. Lady Seraphine Ashcroft. She entered wearing deep crimson silk. Confident, elegant, untouched by scandal. Several heads turned immediately. Others exchanged knowing smiles. Many still believed she would emerge victorious. The hearing began. Hours passed. Witnesses testified. Financial records were presented. Questions flew from every direction. Arthur answered calmly, patiently, never once losing control. Yet gradually Eleanor noticed something disturbing. The evidence seemed incomplete. Critical documents were missing. Witness statements had been altered. Facts vanished whenever they threatened certain powerful families. The hearing was becoming a performance. A carefully orchestrated performance. And someone was directing it. Then Lady Seraphine requested permission to speak. The chamber immediately grew quiet. Everyone sensed the moment approaching. Seraphine moved gracefully toward the center of the hall. When she spoke, her voice carried perfectly. "I regret becoming involved in this matter." The lie arrived wrapped in elegance. Several people nodded sympathetically. "I considered the Duke a trusted friend." Another lie, better disguised. "But friendship cannot excuse wrongdoing." Murmurs spread. Eleanor felt tension tightening throughout the room. Seraphine continued, "The public deserves truth." She produced several documents. Forged documents. Arthur recognized them instantly. Eleanor saw it in his eyes. Yet the damage occurred before objections could be raised. The papers appeared devastating. Property transfers. Financial authorizations. Signatures. Everything carefully constructed to implicate the Duke. Gasps echoed throughout the hall. Reporters scribbled furiously. The atmosphere shifted. Like a tide turning. Slowly. Dangerously. The Blackthorns were losing. For the first time, uncertainty touched Arthur's face. Not fear. Calculation. As though he were deciding whether the moment had finally arrived. Then Seraphine turned. Not toward him. Toward Eleanor. The movement shocked the room. The Duchess felt every eye settle upon her. Seraphine's smile softened. Almost compassionate. Which made her cruelty infinitely worse. "Your Grace," she said gently, "I truly pity you." Eleanor remained silent. "The child you carry deserves stability." The chamber grew still. "The country deserves stability." More silence. "And perhaps." Seraphine paused dramatically. "The Duke deserves someone capable of helping him carry such burdens." The implication landed perfectly. Whispers erupted. Some looked away from Eleanor. Others openly stared. Humiliation swept through her like fire. Yet she refused to lower her head. Refused to give them the satisfaction. Seraphine stepped closer. Confidence radiated from every movement. She believed victory stood within reach. Then she delivered the ultimatum that would echo throughout London for years. "Your Grace." She looked directly at Arthur. The room stopped breathing. "Choose me or your pregnant wife." The words hung in the air. Impossible. Scandalous. Unforgivable. Yet no one interrupted. No one objected. Every soul present waited. The Duke slowly rose. The scrape of his chair echoed through the hall. For several seconds he said nothing. His gaze traveled across the chamber. Across politicians, judges, nobles, reporters. Then finally settled upon Seraphine. Something had changed. The careful restraint he had maintained for years vanished. The caution disappeared. The diplomacy disappeared. Even the fear disappeared. Only resolve remained. "You have made one fatal mistake, Lady Seraphine." Her smile faltered slightly. Arthur opened a leather case resting beside his chair. The chamber leaned forward collectively. From inside he withdrew a bundle of documents. Then another. Then another. Ledger books. Witness statements, property records, bank transfers, years of evidence, a mountain of evidence. The room began changing immediately. Faces paled, eyes widened, whispers became stunned silence. Arthur spoke methodically, relentlessly. Each document destroyed another lie. Each witness statement exposed another deception. Each record connected another member of the conspiracy. Powerful names surfaced, respected names, untouchable names, until suddenly they were no longer untouchable. Seraphine's confidence cracked. For the first time, genuine panic appeared. The empire she had spent years constructing began collapsing around her. One revelation after another. One betrayal after another. One secret after another. The chamber transformed into a battlefield. And Arthur was winning. Finally silence returned. Heavy. Absolute. Seraphine stood motionless. Her face pale. Her future disintegrating before hundreds of witnesses. Yet Arthur was not finished. Slowly he reached inside the leather case once more. Then withdrew a single sealed envelope. Unlike everything else, this document appeared old. Very old. The wax seal remained unbroken. Even Eleanor had never seen it. The Duke stared at the envelope for a moment, then looked toward his wife. Something emotional flickered behind his eyes. Something deeply personal. The room waited. No one moved. No one spoke. Arthur placed the mysterious document upon the table. And when he finally broke the seal, even his enemies leaned forward to see what secret had remained hidden all these years. The broken seal seemed louder than thunder. For a moment, Westminster Hall became so silent that the distant ticking of a clock echoed from somewhere beyond the chamber walls. Arthur Blackthorne unfolded the aged document carefully. The paper had yellowed with time. The handwriting belonged to another generation, another era, another voice. The Duke looked at it for several seconds before speaking. "My mother wrote this letter 11 years ago." A murmur moved through the assembly. The late Duchess of Blackthorne had been one of the most respected women in England. Even now, years after her death, her name carried influence. Arthur continued. "This letter was written shortly before she passed away. It was addressed to me and sealed with instructions that it remain unopened until I faced a decision that would determine the future of our family." Every eye remained fixed upon him. Even Lady Seraphine seemed momentarily uncertain. Arthur lowered his gaze to the page. Then he began reading. "If you are reading this, my son, then the day has come when power and love stand before you and demand that you choose between them." The room grew still. "You will be tempted to trust appearances. Society will tell you which woman is most beautiful, most admired, most useful. Listen carefully but do not obey. A true duchess is not measured by admiration." Arthur's voice remained calm. Yet something deeper moved beneath it. Emotion. Memory. The woman worthy of standing beside a duke is the woman who remains when standing beside him becomes difficult. No one moved. No one even seemed to breathe. Arthur continued. "Choose the woman who protects others when she herself is wounded. Choose the woman who remains kind after cruelty. Choose the woman whose loyalty survives disappointment. Choose the woman who thinks first of family and last of herself." Across the hall, Eleanor felt tears gathering in her eyes. The words struck her with unexpected force. Not because they praised her. Because they described the woman she had spent years trying to become. Arthur slowly lowered the letter. Then he looked directly at Lady Seraphine. For the first time there was no uncertainty. No hesitation. No diplomacy. Only truth. "You demanded that I choose." The chamber remained utterly silent. Lady Seraphine tried to maintain her composure. Tried to preserve the confidence that had carried her this far. But cracks had begun appearing, and everyone could see them. Arthur turned. His gaze found Eleanor. The world seemed to disappear around them. The politicians, the reporters, the judges, the aristocrats, all faded into the background. Only husband and wife remained. His voice softened, yet somehow carried farther than before. "If I must choose." The words hung in the air. The entire chamber leaned toward him. Even those who hated him. Even those who hoped for his downfall. Everyone wanted to hear the answer. Arthur never looked away from Eleanor. "I choose the woman who remained beside me when choosing her brought only suffering." The silence that followed felt endless. Nobody expected the simplicity of the answer. Nobody expected its honesty. There was no grand speech. No elaborate declaration. No theatrical performance. Only truth. And truth possessed a power that no performance could equal. Eleanor felt her heart break and heal at the same time. Months of loneliness. Months of humiliation. Months of believing she had become invisible. Suddenly they no longer defined her. Across the hall, Lady Seraphine's face lost all color. The realization arrived slowly, then completely. She had lost. Not politically, not socially, personally. The victory she believed inevitable had vanished before hundreds of witnesses. Several members of the assembly began quietly distancing themselves from her. Others refused to meet her gaze. The shift was immediate, merciless. Society adored power, but it abandoned failure even faster. Arthur was not finished. He folded his mother's letter carefully, then placed it upon the table. The room assumed the hearing had ended. They were wrong. The Duke stepped away from the witness stand. One step, then another. He crossed the chamber toward Eleanor. Confusion spread among the audience. Nobody understood what he intended. Neither did Eleanor. She rose slowly from her chair. Their eyes remained locked. When Arthur finally reached her, something extraordinary happened. The Duke of Blackthorn knelt. Not partially, not symbolically, fully, before his wife. A gasp swept through Westminster Hall. Several women covered their mouths. Reporters nearly dropped their pens. The sight seemed impossible. One of England's most powerful men kneeling before anyone. Yet Arthur ignored the reaction entirely. His attention remained fixed upon Eleanor. You deserved better than silence. The words were spoken quietly. Only those nearest could hear them. Yet somehow everyone understood. You deserved better than distance. Emotion tightened his voice. A rare thing. Perhaps unprecedented. You deserved a husband who trusted you enough to share his burdens. Eleanor's vision blurred. Tears finally escaped. She no longer cared who witnessed them. Months of grief seemed to dissolve, not disappear. Arthur gently placed a hand over hers, then over the curve of her stomach. Their unborn child moved. The small movement made both of them smile through tears. For a brief moment, nothing else existed. Not scandal, not politics, not conspiracy, only family. The chamber watched in stunned silence, because what unfolded before them was not a political victory. It was something rarer, a reconciliation, a restoration, a love story hidden beneath years of mistakes. Then the spell broke. Officials moved quickly. The evidence Arthur had presented could no longer be ignored. Investigations were ordered immediately. Witnesses were detained. Financial records were seized. Several prominent families suddenly discovered that their influence no longer protected them. The Ashcroft empire began collapsing before sunset. Bank accounts froze. Properties were examined. Associates turned against one another. Secrets emerged from every direction. Lady Seraphine herself stood motionless as officials approached. The proud confidence that once defined her had vanished completely. She looked toward Arthur one final time, perhaps expecting anger, perhaps expecting triumph. Instead she found neither. The Duke simply looked away. The indifference hurt more than hatred ever could. Months later, spring arrived. London transformed beneath sunlight and blooming gardens. The scandals that once dominated every newspaper slowly faded. New stories replaced old ones. Society moved on, as society always did. Yet some changes endured. Construction of Blackthorn Children's Hospital resumed immediately. Donations flooded in from across the country. Supporters who once doubted Eleanor now praised her efforts openly. The hypocrisy amused her, but she no longer needed their approval. She had found something far more valuable. Late one morning, church bells rang throughout London. Inside Blackthorn Palace, a newborn child slept peacefully in his mother's arms. The long-awaited heir. Healthy, strong, perfect. Arthur stood beside the window holding his son's tiny hand. The sight still seemed to astonish him, as though he could hardly believe the child was real. Eleanor watched quietly. The sunlight illuminated father and son together. A future she had once feared might never exist. Arthur looked up and smiled. Not the restrained smile of a duke. The genuine smile of a husband. Of a father. Of a man finally free from secrets. Months later, the grand opening of Blackthorn Children's Hospital drew visitors from across England. Crowds filled the streets. Doctors toured the new wards. Families celebrated. Children laughed in gardens built specifically for them. At the entrance stood a marble plaque. Not bearing the Duke's name. Bearing Eleanor's. Exactly as Arthur had insisted. As evening approached, husband and wife stepped onto a balcony overlooking the city. Below them stretched London. The same city that had whispered against her. judged her, nearly destroyed her. Now church bells drifted across rooftops glowing beneath the setting sun. Arthur placed an arm gently around her shoulders. Their son rested safely in Eleanor's arms. For a while neither spoke. Words felt unnecessary. The journey had already spoken for them. The suffering, the forgiveness, the choice. At last the bells faded into the distance. The sky blazed gold beyond the horizon. And together they watched the sun set over a city that had finally learned the truth about the woman everyone once wanted him to abandon.